All right, here with Jeremy Booth, president of Program 15 Sports, Future Stars Series, author of Inside the Mind of a Scout, astro analyst right now for Katy Houston, was a longtime scout with the Mariners, Brewers, and Twins, and we've been trying to connect for a while. So, Jeremy, thanks for jumping on with me.
Ryan, thanks for having me, man. It is an honor to be on this podcast with you, to be speaking to such a great community of coaches and development personnel and in all walks, right? I mean, it's not just the ABCA, it's such a wide reach. So the fact that you'd have me, it truly is an honor. Thank you.
Did you play for Pick at Cypress?
I did.
Think about the internet, because I put it up there. You had a good year in '96. Is that true? You had 20 doubles and 13 home runs. You're still in the list of people at Cypress in the top 10.
I didn't know. I've never seen that list. Thank you for sending that, or for saying that. Pick is a great guy, man. He was a great coach, and he had a couple of really good assistants. You know what I mean? He had a guy named Ron Hawksinger, who, God rest him, and Bill Pinkham. And I was kind of like their assignment. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, you're gonna go, you deal with the big guy. So it was a lot of fun. Cypress, man, the memories from there are. They'll never leave. It was a great place to be.
You and I had good years in '96. That was my best year in college. Was '96. So
was it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, were you guys using wood back then, though?
No, it was.
The
so that was
era. Those you can throw those.
Yeah.
Steroid era for baseball. You can throw
rods.
those stats out.
The funny thing is, Ryan, I swung a 35. So like Easton and those red lines. Remember those red lines and all that stuff? It didn't. They didn't make it in 35, so I swung a 35 like 31 or 32, and I didn't have that extra exit bump. You know what I mean? But I remember those things, man. Those were launching pads. It was just exploded. It was a lot of fun to watch guys take BP. I'll tell you that.
But you mentioned Ryan Howard on Twitter because you're talking about Jordan, but that was not fun. My first year coaching was his freshman year at Missouri State, so Evansville. They show up. And we were playing on campus that time, and our field was really small on campus. He hit a ball his freshman year over. There was a fitness center in right field. He hit a ball over that. Those Missouri State teams were ridiculous because Matt Sapicki was on that team. That whole lineup at Missouri State could mash. It was not fair them using -5 bats back then.
No, and I can only imagine what Ryan Howard looked like with one of those in his hands, man.
He looked like Fred McGriff back then. Everybody saw him in the big leagues and how big he was. He was long and wiry. When he was a freshman, he was long and wiry. Like, he was not built big. He just was wiry. One of those athletes where you knew once he started to put strength on, like, it was going to be Katie bar the door with how wiry he was.
Wow. Well, it turned into something pretty good. I'll tell you that.
For sure. And then how'd you pick New Mexico?
So, Ryan, first of all, this is pretty in-depth. This is good. Like, this is some questions I don't usually get. True story is my road of even getting to Cypress College. I was at Loyola Marymount as a freshman. It was the first year of the NCAA clearinghouse, and there was a mix-up, and we'll leave it there, a mix-up in one of my math classes. So the 48H form, you remember that back in the day? So for some reason, even though I got into school, had good grades, good SATs, one of my math classes just didn't transfer according to my high school. I don't know what that was. So I had to transfer out and was ineligible at a Division I school my freshman year. So I had to transfer out and I ended up going to Cypress. That's how I met Pick and stayed there for a couple of years. And to be honest with you, Pick at the time wanted me to go to Ole Miss. And there was a guy named Steve Abney, who's a scout, Abney was coaching.
Midwest.
Right, yeah, at Ole Miss. And, Southern California kid, Mississippi in the 90s. Not so sure I felt real comfortable. I know at the time, and I wanted to hit the ball a long way in the air. And so when the draft didn't work the way that I wanted it to work, I ended up going to New Mexico State, and that's where it was. Hit the ball in altitude and hit some home runs. So
yeah, a guy I used to coach with, and coach, he's at New Mexico, and he's like, "This is different out here, coach." He goes, "The fields you can't make them too big out there." Goes ball flying.
Yeah. The park we played in, Presley Askew Stadium, which is going to go an overhaul in 20 whatever years. That place, man, the wind blew out to right center, like 45 miles an hour. It came out and over into the football stadium, and all you had to do was get this thing up in the air, Man, people were circling bases. We had some football scores. It was like 24 to 22. I mean, it was insane. I think we scored like 13 runs a year or 13 runs a game that year, and our pitching staff gave up, or we scored 11. Pitching staff gave up 13. It was a joke. I mean, it was one of those things that was a great place to hit.
Did you know you were going to get in scouting after you got done playing?
I had no idea. So there was at the time when I was done playing. I remember waking up one day and knowing it was over, playing wise. We all have that moment, right? You just know. And I made a phone call to Brian Draymond, who went on to coach the White Sox, former big leaguer, who was the manager where I'd finished. And I said, listen, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. I had a chance to go to camp. I did, as a 30-year-old, last man in, first guy to go type situation. Wasn't really interested in doing that. And I said to him, I don't want to play anymore. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I'd like to figure out coaching. I don't know what's next for me. And wherever the game kind of takes me is where I wanted to go. So he said, all right, well, you could be my hitting coach and you handle the hitters and identify them and I'll handle the pitching. Sweet. All right. So independent ball coaching, Sussex County, Sussex Skyhawks, $2,500 a month, 4 months a year. Still pretty good pay to get started, right? I mean, that's not bad. And I got to go find these hitters. So Matt Stark had something called International Performance Baseball or something like that. And they used to run these camps in the fall for free agents and the camps in the spring for free agents. So I knew Cash Beecham. These are all names, and Cash said, hey, why don't you come handle the catchers and do some stuff with us and Matt Stark? I said, all right, I'll come down. So I went down to Cocoa Beach, right? And so we're staying at Cocoa Beach. We're doing this 10-day spring training. Well, I'm doing my early morning catch and work, and then we got a game. So I'm sitting on deck circle. We're coaching, and there's like this weird play at the plate or something, and the umpire messes this one up, and it's an odd play. And I, as a player, you never look behind you anymore once you're playing. You stop looking at the scouts. You don't pay attention to what's going on. I hadn't noticed there were probably 150 scouts in this place. I hadn't seen it. And this guy says to me, he goes, hey, that doesn't happen much at Beverly Hills High School, does it? And I was like, who are you? Turn around, who's this guy? And he looks to me, he goes, you don't remember me? And I said, I have no idea who you are. I said, that's pretty good. He goes, my name's Tim O'Neill. I'm the Midwest supervisor, a cross-checker with the Minnesota Twins. I saw you play in high school. I was coaching at Chaminade. He said, why don't we talk when the game's over? I said, all right, because now I'm like, what is going on? Like, what's up? So game's over. I go find him. Hey, man, nice to meet you. He goes, yeah, we met once before, a long time ago. He said, yes, what are you guys doing here? Well, there was a pitcher, Felipe Amont, first rounder, right? So he's Canada, so they always went to Florida. I know nothing about any of this at the time. I'm just coaching. I'm trying to coach some catchers and make a little money, figure out what I want to do. And Timmy says, you ever thought about scouting? I said, never a day in my life. Never once. And he goes, well, why don't we talk about it? He said, go finish what you're doing. We're going to go watch this guy pitch. Come down, take a look, see what we do. And, if you want to talk further, we can. So I do exactly that. I watch this guy warming up in the bullpen. This is going to sound bad, but I wasn't impressed at the time. I just, because you're coming off the field, right? So I wasn't impressed. And I'm looking around and I'm like, what do you think? He goes, this guy's going to go in the first 15 picks. All right. I mean, I don't know anything, so I'm not being presumptuous.
Over the years. Yeah. I've been wrong.
Yeah. I didn't know anything. I'm just like, all right. So he says, look, we're going to go do this. You go do what you're doing. Here's my card. He said, we got some stuff coming up. We're in the season. He said, let's get through the year and then call me at the end of the summer if you want to scout. Let's talk about it. So I do exactly that. We go through the year and I work for Mal Fitchman while I'm doing this. Remember Mal Fitchman?
Mal was the manager for Springfield when I was playing at Evansville in the Frontier League.
All right.
And by the way, I was at one of Tim O'Neill's tryout camps.
Were you really?
Yeah,
this is great.
Midwest guy, longtime Midwest guy. So I did one of Tim O'Neill's tryout camps.
Yeah, he was from SoCal and was in Lexington. I mean, he's a great dude, real grizzled guy, real straightforward. So anyway, Timmy was great. But so we get to the end of the year, and I worked with Mal Fitchman as an independent associate scout for the Phillies, right? And Mal just says, hey, if you want to do, I said, Mal, I have no idea what I'm doing on this side of it. He said, well, just tell me if guys can play or not. That's okay. So guys can play. So I started trying to learn. I started trying to learn what the grades are. I started trying to learn, how to project guys or, what these guys are looking at. And I'm coaching and I'm having a good time with the hitters. But it became real clear that being a coach was different than a player. And while I was very interested in development, I didn't know that being a pro coach was best for my life at that time. Just don't know that it was. Season's over. We don't have a great year. Have an okay year. Have a great year. Sent some guys back to organizations. And I go down and work with Matt Stark again in this camp. Well, before in the fall version. Well, I look at this. I get done with it. I go back home and I look at Tim's card. I pull it up and I'm like, you know what? Let's call it. This is before cell phones were on business cards, right? This is where you had to leave voicemails for people and they had to check it and get back to you. Way different time than we live in today. And I call them, and I call the Twins, and then their admin, Kate Townley, who's been there forever, she actually answers the phone. Now, Ryan, people don't answer the phone in those offices. They go to voicemail all the time. But she actually answered the phone. And I said, hi, my name's Jeremy Booth, looking for Tim O'Neill. I was supposed to call him at the end of the season. And she goes, wow, Jeremy, I never answer the phone. She said, but I answered yours. She said, I'll give Tim a message. Would you like his voicemail? I said, please. Same thing on the voicemail. Within about, an hour and a half, phone rings. And it's Timmy. He's calling my cell. We talked for about 45 minutes, and he goes, look, we're going to have some interviews here in the next few weeks. We got some changes and stuff going on, and we have some areas that'll be open. Are you interested in talking about it? I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. He said, all right, well, let's keep in touch as we go forward. We're down in Fort Myers, got some meetings going, and sweet. Thanks, Tim. Talk to you whenever. So I'm going to go back to do my thing. Next morning, 9 a.m., phone rings. It's Earl Frischman, right? Earl Frischman says to me, hey, Jeremy, I saw you playing in high school. He actually grew up in Westchester when I did, so we got a little common there. You got a minute? Yeah, so we talked for 45 minutes or so, right? 50 minutes. He goes, well, listen, we have some interviews. I know what Timmy said. It sounds like you might be a fit, but we have some interviews going through in Arizona next 10 days or so. 2 weeks. Can you get out there and talk since you want to come? So I was thinking about going back to the West Coast. Yeah, no problem. Just keep me posted, right? Okay, great. Next morning, about 9 a.m., phone rings. Jeremy, Darren Johnson, scouting director, Minnesota Twins. And now I'm like, what is going on? And I look back and I smile because I'm grateful for the way they treated me. And he said, we have an hour 15-minute conversation, right? I mean, it's a long one. And at the end, he says, hey, listen, so we're having meetings down here at Fort Myers. I know that Earl and Timmy told you that. He said, can you get down here and talk to us? So I went from like 6 weeks to like 2 weeks to like, can you come down here? Now, I'm an ex-minor league guy, finished in independent ball, coach. You know what I'm talking about. We're not exactly rolling in it right now. We're trying to figure it out. And he says, I said, when can I well, sure, but when do you need me? He says, how's tomorrow? Okay, what? So I said, man, I don't know that I can get it done tomorrow. I don't have the finances to just, pop a plane ticket. He goes, no, I understand. He goes, why don't we do this? Why don't we take care of your flight? He said, and if you want to stay the night, you can. And I said, well, I don't want to do what's bad for the club. I mean, if you need me there, what if you need me for? Then he said, why don't you bring a bag and just in case, and then, we'll bring you back, send you back, or keep you here. No problem. See you in the morning. Kate calls me, tickets all set. JetBlue special out of Boston was where I was at, right? And we're going down to Fort Myers. And so I get on the bird and I get down to Fort Myers. I get off and Kate's picking me up. And I get in the car and she says, I'm kind of interested to see what happens here. I'm like, well, okay. And why? She goes, they don't do this. I have no idea, Ryan. I have no idea what's going on. She says, just kind of moving. She says, this is the Twins. I said, we take our time. I said, well, I appreciate that. Looking forward to having this meeting. So I walk in, and there's a firing squad in this office. I got Joel Leppel, who's the field coordinator. I got Mike Ruth, who's the Midwest guy. I got Timmy. I got Sean Johnson, who at the time was going to be the East Coast guy. I've got Earl. I've got DJ. I've got a couple. Bill Smith, who was a GM, was in there. Terry Ryan was walking around. Man, I'm sitting there like this going, I was like not even thinking about this 4 days ago, and now I'm in front of you guys, and I'm not this lined up. Anyway, the interview went about 7 hours. And it was, they asked me some of the most insightful questions that you could. Mike Radcliffe was in there too. God rest him. They asked me some of the most insightful questions you could ever think of. They asked me to rank things like integrity and work ethic and perseverance and talent and commitment, and just rank them in order. Calling cards. Minnesota Twins for me were a calling card for how you should conduct yourself. As far as
at that point, the Twins had it going good.
They did, and a lot of it had to come, or almost all of it, from Terry Ryan, Mike Radcliffe, and the people they brought in there. And looking back on it, if anybody even listened, obviously I've remained close to several of them as they've turned over the years. Being that organization was an honor. It was just an honor to do that and being part of who they were. Interviews over. I said a couple of dumb things as a young, inexperienced guy might say, said a guy I was going to throw hard that wasn't, and so I put my foot in my mouth a couple of times trying to impress. And, I go to the airport and DJ calls me at the airport and he says, it's another 20-minute conversation. They checked in on me every few days from there on out, just to make sure, and then Ryan, you remember how this went. You had to send like actual letters out. So you had to get these form letters with the resume cover and the letter, not the email, the actual letter. And so I had done that for player development. I'd done that for scouting to all 30. And by then, some stuff started trickling in, mostly on the player development side, to be honest with you. And I took a job with the Twins and never looked back. It was one of the best experiences of my life to be with that organization and to be around those people. And getting into scouting and player evaluation was never a thought until then.
Is the Midwest the training grounds for amateur scouting?
It's funny. I said that to
for me. I spent most of my career in the Midwest, and it just seemed like that's where everybody got sent in the beginning, was in the Midwest.
The funny thing about the Midwest, and remember, I did grow up in the hotbed, if you will, a hotbed of Southern California. Is you have to be able to evaluate. Like, you've got to be able to evaluate. The kids, they're not ready yet. They almost always pop later, need a few years. They're coming out of cold weather, so they're not outside in any level of it, right? Anywhere, even starting at Oklahoma or even Dallas, there's time they're inside. And so with the cold weather side of it, the arm strength, the delivery, the execution, the sense of urgency, the resiliency that these kids have, they either have it or they don't. Right. And so you got to learn to connect to these kids pretty quick. And as far as Midwest people, for a lot of reasons, and I say this, they're pretty discerning, and they should be. Right. They have I had this thought process when we started the Future Star series. I said, if it works in Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and West Virginia, and Indiana, like, we're good. It's going to work anywhere else, because that's a very tough group to be involved with, and you should, because they're discerning. They know what they're looking at. They can smell it when it comes their way, and it's not straight. So, you have to be able to connect there. It's much more about the human element than it is in some other parts of the country. And when you have that understanding of how it flows, man, it's the training ground. Like, you got to figure it out. Anybody can go to SoCal and even in Houston, Texas, where I am now, and go, hey, that guy's got a good arm. Good for you. You know what I mean? Like, what else we got?
It was the weather piece too, because obviously if I'm a higher level scout, I want to sit in games where it's warm. I don't want to be in Illinois where it's 15 degrees trying to figure out if a kid could play or not. Brian Bridges is a scouting director for the Royals now, and he and I coached in the Cape, but his first assignment was with the Angels in the Midwest, and he would come to our games at Evansville, and you could just tell he was miserable having to sit out and watch good players, but you're a little distracted when you have a winter coat on and stocking cap and gloves.
Yeah, my first experience with that, with hand sanitizer and and like lip balm and all that stuff you got to do to make sure you can function. Learning how to write on your game cards with gloves on. Have one glove on, one glove off to do it. Put it back on. Yeah, no, it was unique, and it was. I'm thankful for it though, because it really helped form me as an evaluator. Bridgie and I ran into each other when he was with the Braves in Tennessee. Right, and I had Tennessee as my bottom part of the area with Minnesota. He's obviously an advisory board member now, and a good friend, and very thankful for him too. But it was definitely a formative time. And if you've never done it, and you kind of step into SoCal and you step into South Florida, it's like, I want to check that one out first.
Yes. With all the changes in minor league baseball, would you like to be playing minor league baseball right now?
Pretty good question. I will say that any day you get to play this game and be paid to do it is a blessing. So the answer is yes when it comes to that. I would say that there's a lot more sense of urgency and a lot less time to develop and a lot more need to be ready-made skill-wise, not just tool-wise, but skill-wise when you go in, or it's a very short window.
Yeah.
You see that in the change in the way that people are drafted now. Who's going in the first and second, third round, where the money's going to, the risk versus reward, the way that players are quantified. And look, man, we're guilty of that too. Like we do a lot of quantification stuff. I know you've seen that and how we go about it. But it's a different era. I mean, there's no more 7 affiliates. I'll tell you that. You used to have 7 different places to go play, and now it seems like the independent leagues are what's back in the front of the mind.
Yeah. I mean, have the changes been good for baseball?
I think some of them were needed.
For me, I really like the 6-day schedule where they're at the same place for 6 straight days. I think that is tremendous. Obviously, they're getting paid more money, but with that,
sure,
clubs are going to try to save money, so you don't have as many players. You're not going to, what you just said, like you don't have time to develop, so you might miss on a guy or two that's a late developer, But for me, that part is good.
I agree with you. I also agree with the gym upgrades. I mean, we used to have to go to host city and hunt for a gym somewhere. Go to the hotel and get access. It was. I will say this: Major League Baseball, and I did say this to both sides, players and MLB, and again, this is you and me talking, and we know that there's connections both sides. I said both. I said the rule changes that were made because the way the game was being played today, with so much max effort off the backstop and so much intent and so many injuries and so much selling out for power, required some intervention because we weren't intervening on our side, right? We weren't doing it collectively as a coaching or evaluation group. So the MLB and the PA together, even though MLB has the majority of the say in that, had to decide on what they needed to do. Now, whether we should have had to make those changes is another story, right? But they needed to get made. We needed to have the human body rest because no one wants to see everybody blown out with UCLs. We need to have more of an emphasis on starters and some of the roster stuff that's been done, and even just some of the fundamentals with bigger bases. You look at them and you go, and then you look at the way the game's played now, and you kind of go, I kind of get it. I kind of get why they're looking at it that way. So I don't agree with all of them, and no one should agree with all of them because we're not robots. But I do agree with the 6-day stuff, like you said. I do agree with the upgrades. I do agree.
They're eating a lot better, too, like the nutrition side. We have high A here, and so I have managers come in and they are feeding them much better. Sleep's important, nutrition's important, all that stuff's important. Like they're doing a much better job on that side.
So no more like double fist and hot dogs and PB&J like we used to do.
Everybody has a nutritionist now or dietitian. Like they're planning their meals out for them. It used to be your trainer trying to do that stuff where that's not needed.
Yeah, it's a better setup how they're taking care of the kids. That's for the players. That's for sure. I say kids; they're all grown men.
They're still kids though. Like when you listen to those guys talk about their players. They're still kids at heart. They are.
Yeah, and I guess it goes fast, right? So, any chance you get to play this game is a gift. Any chance you get to be a part of this game is a gift. There isn't a guy that's ever played this at any level that doesn't miss it. I mean, you miss it. We all miss it at whatever level that was. Lots of times it's our teammates. Lots of times it's the approach. Lots of times going to the ballpark every day. That's why we stay in it. Right, that's why we try to give what we can to it and make a living out of it because it is so infectious. And something I learned a while ago, Ryan, is it doesn't need any of us.
No, I used to tell my players that all the time. I'm like, the game's going to keep going. It's been around since the 1800s. Like, I know you think that you're important, which you are at this point because you're in it, but the game's going to still keep going. Once all of us are done with it, the game's going to keep going. Yeah,
and the best part about that right there is that you can't choose it. It has to choose you. In whatever the role it is, baseball's got to look at you. And to me, it's a living, breathing entity that made up a bunch of people where everybody's got an opinion. And that, as frustrating as that can be sometimes on these social media channels, it's also one of the best things about it is that literally everybody's got a voice, right? And what this is. And the way it comes together is that baseball has to look at you and say, yeah, you fit somewhere. You can't buy your way into it. You can't beg your way into it. You can't sneak your way into it. At some point, that's going to catch up with you, right? Baseball has to decide that you fit. And then whatever niche that is, however that works, at least the way I was brought up, it's a blessing to have it. You have to embrace it and push through it and be good at that. And if there's more for you, it'll come, right? To me, because of those things, because it's hard to do, it's the greatest game in the world.
Do we ever get to a strict slot system? I mean, you tweeted out the other day about $1,000 sign. There's been plenty of them, but do we ever get to where pick 50 gets this and pick 500 gets this? There's no negotiations on it, more like the NFL model.
I don't think so with the union having minor leaguers now. I don't think so. If any, you put, I personally have gone both sides. I don't understand why we don't have it in some ways, because it's the pick. But I also understand there's now 20 rounds instead of unlimited rounds, and you have to be able to move your money around, how you want to. And sometimes scouts got to be able to scout, right? And the NFL's got what, 6 rounds? Is that right? 6? Yeah, NBA's got 2. We've got 20. We used to have. I got buddies that were drafting like the 75th round. Like we used to have. Remember that? We used to have
South
drafts that kept going.
42nd rounder coming out of Evansville.
Yeah, there you go.
It was a 20th rounder. That's you look at it now, and those guys were good big leaguers.
That's right, and guys that just you could scout, and teams used to just pass. I don't want to draft anymore and pass, and then they just keep going until guys stop drafting. I know that's not quite the answer to the question. My answer is I hope we don't. Because I hope that clubs are able to reward. I do think there needs to be limits, and so I don't have any problem with the limits. I think we've got a little nuts, right, as far as the total bonus pool. But I also know this: clubs that can evaluate need to not be penalized over clubs that can't. And there are always shifts in the industry with organizations that are good evaluating clubs and ones that aren't. Right, and you can see it show up in how they draft and who gets to the big leagues, and even the Astros, who I have been, it's probably fair to say I've been critical of them over some years, and a lot of the drafts that they did, Bobby Heck and his crew built a very good system with what they had, and then Luno came in, and regardless of love, hate Jeff, regardless of that, what Jeff did well was he took the assets that were left and he used that in the waiver system. He used that at the upper levels of development. He used that to understand his assets, and he moved them around well. And those two combinations together are both evaluation. One's just amateur and one's just pro. And next thing you know, we got a dynasty, if you will, right? Very, very good organization for a long time. I don't think you penalize clubs for that. I don't know why you would penalize clubs for that. And so my hope is that we don't go to that and that the pools get broader to entice more players to come out of high school and play a little bit.
And selfishly, because I am a college first guy, I think it helps the game of college immensely, because I think you entice seniors to come back for their senior year of college because of that. So selfishly, I think the college game, the product on the field is the best it's ever been. The draft has a lot to do with that, and the development side that college has been invested in for a long time. But selfishly, as a college baseball fan, I would love to see that, because I think it takes some pressure off a junior not having to sign because he knows it's a straight slot system going into the
I 100% agree with that, and I mean across the board, because I look at college baseball now, and college baseball for a guy who's been in the pro game is it's a window. Right, it's a window of extra development. It's a next stop, but it's not the end game in your head. It just isn't, because you're looking beyond that. But I will say this: college baseball is in a bit of a renaissance. It's in a bit of a infusion of talent that's never been seen before. It's in a bit of a financial parity in ways that's never been seen before, brought on by NIL and some of the other things that are there. And it is very good. It's very entertaining, and it's fun to go watch. And, the fans get into it. And in a lot of these games, man, the fans are better there than even in AAA, right? So it's kind of hard to tell a kid who's going to go sign for next to nothing in some ways, right? He's going to go out and go through the minor leagues for 3 or 4 years and play in front of nobody and not have some of the benefits. So I'm with you. I think that the way they're doing it does help college baseball. From the analytical side, college products are more finished, so they get better competition consistently. There's no question about that, right? Better pool of players and an easier way of evaluating for clubs that prefer to go that route. So it's
well, look at Wyatt Langford. Wyatt Langford couldn't get on the field at Florida. his freshman year because he was more of a football guy. Plays sparingly a little bit, and then junior year goes off, and then a year later he's on the big league club.
That's pretty impressive. I watched him hit in spring a little bit. He's all right. he's going to be just fine.
But you see with the high school kids too now. I mean, Jackson Holiday, like you can go down the laundry list of, yes, good college players, but good high school guys too that signed coming out of high school.
Thing about Jackson Holiday is that he put the time in that 1 year of jump to go from an afterthought to 1-1 and hasn't made anybody regret it. Matt, that's obviously a bloodline family, right? We remember Tom. Right, and we know,
but that's not always a slam dunk. We've seen a ton of ex-big leaguers kids. I saw a ton of ex-big leaguers kids when I was recruiting that weren't good. Like that's not always a given that those bloodlines mean that they're going to be good players.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that either. I think that I think you're looking at Matt and Josh. I have a funny Josh story to remind me to share with you one time about Josh and I connected, but.
Fine.
It's my big dog. One sec.
All right, we've had those before. That's why I don't record at home because of my dogs.
He's 120 pounds.
Yeah. Ours think they are. They're like 35, but they're protectors, and they think they're 120 pounds.
Gotcha. Anyway, but the Holiday family, Josh and obviously starting with Tom and that whole Oklahoma State tradition, right? That tree where that went, and start with Gary Ward and all the way down through. Jackson put the time in and he's earned it. I think that the high school kids have begun to separate themselves. The ones that go out. One of the things that we do is, and maybe this isn't, I'm just going to say it, Ryan. That's just me. One of the things that we do is try to find undiscovered assets. The Tim Kenses, the Ricky Tiedemans, the Justin Langs, Dylan Cruz. Anybody could pick Dylan Cruz out. We had DC. Cam Collier when he was a freshman, right? When people were saying he was raw, stuff like that. And I know those are guys that go to the top of the draft. Marco Raya, Cohen Moreno. Trying to Kyron Paris. Guys that people just aren't necessarily. Brock Jones. We've been fortunate to find guys like that who have that extra giddy up of going to do it. And I know as a college guy, we don't want kids in there with bad makeup. You can't have kids in there with bad makeup. They're not going to go to class and compete, and can't do that. And it's the same in pro ball. Every player we're talking about that comes out of high school, it's got some success. The moment's never too big for them. You can't. If the moment's too big for you, or you think you've made it, Ryan, there's nothing that drives me more nuts than a kid that thinks he's made it already, because you haven't made anything, right? I don't care if you're ranked 1 or 9 million. You ain't made anything. You're just getting going. And when I look at players and the high school guys that really do get there, it's the ones that don't think they've made it. It's the ones that always have something else to prove. It's the ones that just want to go play. And the kids that come out of college that succeed have been either humbled a little bit, right, on the way in, and they understand now there's better talent out there than just that fishbowl they were in. And they also have that turnaround and that big jump that they've made, and they're ready to go perform. So college baseball has been a huge beneficiary of the draft soft slot, the cap pools, and it'll continue to do that. And I don't think that's bad for baseball at all. I still will say that I wish they added 10 rounds back to the draft. And I told them so. And the reasoning for that is because you have guys who kind of get in between there, and they can't go to college because they just can't get there, but they have enough talent to get in the door, and they just have a little more development time. I think those are good for the game too. You don't want to miss those guys, the Sal Fasanos that you mentioned, guys like that. But as I say that, junior college baseball is pretty good right now too. So I guess there's a place for all of them.
College baseball. How'd you know when it was time to pivot to what you're doing now?
So, I'm extremely loyal to Jack Sorensic, and Jack's a former general manager. And he was in Milwaukee. We talked about my time with the Twins. I was there a year. it was a interesting fit. They were going to change my area again. I said, I remember I had Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and all of a sudden I was going to get like Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, I think, and maybe one more, and it was going to be like this. And they wanted me to live in Memphis. I actually wanted me to live in Jackson, Mississippi. I played in Jackson, Mississippi. And so I said, hey, I'll live in Nashville. Nothing against Jackson. I get it. But at the time, for me, it wasn't the right fit. And they said, bottom line, we couldn't find an agreement on where I needed to go, okay, for what's best personal fit for them, too. And Jack called, and he asked for permission to talk to me. And he had South Texas, Louisiana open, and he had North Texas, and he had some other stuff. And DJ said to me, if you have a job here, but if it's a better fit for you there, you have my blessing. I'll give you permission to go do it. And so he gave Jack permission. And so I talked to Jack.
That's crazy to me about the scouting and professional side of it, because college isn't that way, where if you hire somebody, yeah, you'll have a conversation, but you're not asking for somebody's permission. That's a crazy thing for me on the pro side, with how much people have to sign off on you taking another job.
Yeah, and that's gotten in my way a little bit before.
For a lot of guys. Not just you, for a lot of guys.
Yeah, it wasn't granted at one point. But to that story, Jack asked permission, brought me down to Houston. I accepted the job. I moved to Houston, Texas, and I've been here ever since. And then 3 years later, when he was able to, and he's now the general manager in Seattle after a couple of seasons, he asked for permission on me again. Him and Tom McNamara brought me over there, who of course was a Brewer with Jack for a long time, and then went over to Seattle with him. Anyway, Jack had been there for about 7 years. There have been some things that have gone on in Seattle that, in the interest of protecting the clubhouse, as far as pieces and being allowed to add, and just wasn't able to come together. We had a really good opportunity in 2014, and it wasn't able to come together. I was doing a kind of a mix of things over there, Ryan, and I know you've done your homework, so you probably know this already, but I don't know if you knew this. I started out over there as the Midwest supervisor, and then I became the West Coast supervisor, but I stayed in Houston. With that job, I had the West. They ran me all over the country. Okay, I did stuff in Latin America. I did our affiliates. I did some advanced scouting, big league stuff, and minor league stuff. Not extensive on really all of it, but a little bit of it, right? Is that, you know what I mean? So 3 or 4 affiliates, spent time in Arizona. You get the idea. Matter of fact, if you look at Derek Jeter's the captain in the scene in Fenway when he rolls his ankle at first base, I'm sitting behind home plate. So it was that was the type of stuff that they had me doing, and I'm very thankful for that as well. But anyway, I was on the road about 240 days a year. It's a lot, doing all that, and I was never home. At one point, I went from Dominican to Houston to Alaska to California to the Cape, back in like a week, right? And saw our affiliates, Arizona. It's crazy. And I was writing up players, and I was doing stuff, and so thankful for the time with it, but it wasn't going anywhere. And, Mac and I had different visions on what, there's going to be a new GM coming in. And it was kind of a situation for me where I knew I was ready to do something else, or at least something more, because I was being used that way. Right. And he wanted me to move to Phoenix with the new GM, because obviously now that was going to be what was going to happen. And I talked to Jack, and Jack said, your contract's up. If this isn't going real well, and it's time for you, because I'm probably not going to be back. If it's, you want to go somewhere else, have an open conversation with Mac. And so I said, Mac, I'll come back and do what you want me to do, but I'm not going to do the West. Not from Houston, and I'm not moving to Phoenix. And whatever else you want me to do is fine. And, he said, well, we're not going to renew your contract. I said, okay, good enough, because it was time for me to not do something else or not do that anymore. I wasn't good at home. There was a balance that had shifted somewhere. And I don't believe in this life we're really going to be good at anything if we're out of balance. You got to have it somewhere. And so that was the way to do it, time to leave. The day I left, phone rang. I don't know, probably 100 times. So, it felt like that anyway. And I heard from almost everybody. And we narrowed it down to a few clubs and went on some interviews for some pretty good positions. Dodgers, Padres, a couple other ones. couldn't find the right fit. It just couldn't find the right fit. You know what I mean. You've been there. You just can't find the right fit for what you're looking for and maybe what they need. And the Dodgers at that time, had Andrew Friedman, who had just kind of got there, and so they were just bringing people in. They're bringing minds in. Let's talk about this. And I knew Billy Gasparino from when he'd been in Oklahoma State. Back to that Tom Holliday stuff, and I'd been at New Mexico State, and we connected. In the scouting world. And it just wasn't a fit. I just couldn't find that fit. So I stayed home and I started to work with some pro guys because now I could. Right now I was a free agent, right? So you can't go. You're not tampering now, guys. Hey, I need some help. Can you help me with this? Something with that. And once I got into doing that, I knew it was time to do something else. And leaving scouting, and although I've entertained quite a bit from different clubs to go back in different roles, not so much as a scout. As time has gone on, the roles have gotten a little bit different, but. It became time for me to leave that in the rearview mirror on that side and try to find a way to impact the game on a broader scale in a way that was helpful to the next players, the next generations, and also something that I felt good about doing when I woke up every day.
And we talk about fail forward moments all the time on here, and like you getting shipped to Houston. At the time, you're probably like, man, I don't know. But now that you ended up in Houston and like that pivots you to the next thing where you don't realize that, okay, that's what life's path, the universe was trying to shift me, even though I probably didn't want to go to Houston. That we talk a lot about fail forward moments, and that's a huge fail forward moment. It's like, okay, I don't think this is really going to work out. But looking back now, like that was supposed to happen that way, you ending up in Houston.
The irony of that, Ryan, is I kept trying to find ways to get back home to SoCal. I kept trying to find ways to do that. And I had a chance. I had a chance, a couple years after when I came to Seattle. If you really think about it, and I left LA in 2005. I moved to Boston. I was there for a few years. And then I went to Kentucky for 9 months. That's what I was there in Florence for. And then I ended up in Houston, Texas in the fall of 2008. And by 2011, I had a chance to go home. So I wasn't really gone all that long. I had a chance to go to the West Coast and beat up near my family and my parents and everybody that was there. And I said, I'm right here in Houston, Texas, and I'm good here in Houston, Texas. And it had become home. It was something that I never thought would happen. And then it came to embrace it, and it's second nature to me now.
When did you get hooked up with KHOU?
2017. I got to tell you, it's one of the best interviews I've ever had, man. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. So, 2017, this is just, or 16 rather, this is just kind of getting going, right? We got our first few events out there. I've got some local big leaguers that are working with me on helping some of these pro guys. And we had some guys that we helped, Brady Rogers and Dave Rollins and Alex Jackson, Michael Reed, who I'd actually signed, some of those guys. AJ Reed was here for a little bit. The Asian kid from Korea that played with the Giants for a minute and went back over to Korea, he was training here for a minute. So, we had some pretty good guys. Tyler Beatty was through here. We had some guys that were here. And when Dylan Thomas, one of my, I can't believe I left him out. Anyway, when that was out there and these kids were working out and these guys were playing, they're performing, they're getting better. Obviously, we hooked up with New Balance and became the Future Star Series in July of 2016. And we started getting these events out there and doing our combines, rolling that into 2017. Well, right around that time, Jason Bristol, who is a well-decorated anchor with a lot of Emmys, got to the area. And Jason's a huge sports guy because that's what he does. But he's a really big baseball guy. And so he's looking around and finding stuff, and he kind of calls me one day. And he says, hey, I read about Program 15, see who's there, would love to come talk to you about it. And I said, hey, Jason, I appreciate it, but I'm not ready yet. It's not ready for you to see it and for to go out public, but, thank you for the interest. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will call you when I'm ready for you to see it, when we're ready to go. So we had a couple of events going, and of course they start going well. And man, Ryan, you know how it is, man. We're doing something new. You're trying to figure out, does that work? Does this work? What is this going to be? Where does this go? And thankfully, the amateur community, to some level, was ready for it, ready for something different at the time. And so there was a lot of positive reception towards that way. Got something going, got started with getting some good players. And so I called Jason, March of 2017 now. I said, all right, I'm ready. Now we can talk about it. I'm ready. And so we talked about it a little bit, and he said, hey, why don't We do a little story on your background. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's just get on camera. He said, you've done a lot of interviews before. I said, yeah, I've done a few. He said, you comfortable? I said, yeah, no problem. So he comes out and he watches our first international week. Now there's Noah Naylor. There's Grayson Rodriguez. There's some pretty good players on the field. We have, he's out there, he's like, man, this is all right. This is pretty good. And we did a little promo ahead of that and story on KHOU. Well, after the event, after he sees it, he goes, Astros are going to earn the playoffs. You want to come, do a guest spot. And I'm just looking at him like, why not? Let's go see if we do it. Went on the show. Ryan, I was nervous, boy. I was nervous. I was trying to keep my arms down, just on my camera. I'm trying to wipe my head, I'm trying to stay as normal as I can. I got such good co-hosts there that were helping me. I got Seth Payne, who's a football guy, and he knows baseball as well. I got Daniel Gutera. I got Matt Musil, just retired, and of course, Jason. And so they're guiding me pretty good, right? And so I do the first one. It's on the Astros in the ALCS. Looking back on it right now, man, that was terrible, right? But you know what? Like it was good enough
You got to start somewhere.
Second shot.
It's not supposed to be good. The first one's not supposed to be good, and honestly, it was probably better than what you thought. Like I think we're so hard on ourselves. You're going to be your biggest critic on any of that stuff that you put out there. I'm sure from the outside looking in, nobody thought like you're going to be so harsh on yourself with that stuff.
When you're a player. You're right. When you're a player, though, right? And if you're my coach and you're asking me questions, I'm not going to divulge every piece of information. That's the opposite of what I do. I'm going to be humble. I'm going to talk a little bit backwards. I'm going to give you the answer that you need that sounds good but isn't necessarily the truth. I'm going to do what I got to do to keep the interview moving and not give up too much. So it's like, what'd you think of Lance McCullers today? Lance has a good arm and the breaking ball was effective and keeps you off balance. He's always a tough at bat. He didn't say anything, you know what I mean? But that's the player answer, you know what I mean? So when you do that, and you have to get out of that, you have to kind of, bring this personality out to project. And so I had no clue how to do that. Anyway, first one went okay, and they said, hey, they're going to go to the World Series playing the Dodgers. You want to come back and do it again? Yeah, this time you got to wear a jacket. All right, so I put a suit jacket or sport coat on, and I go in there and I do it, and then it became something. It became something that was aggressively instructive. And Jason did a very good job of teaching me what I needed to know to that point, and he brought me along. So did Daniel, so did Matt. And next thing you know, 7 years later, we've been in almost every ballpark in the country. We've been in the postseason almost every year. We've been in the pandemic we did from home, but back in 21 we're in Atlanta again. It's something that I'm in all-star games now. I'm very grateful for it. And Jason decided to pick me out as a scout who hadn't been a general manager, or some guys usually get those type of roles, and believe in my ability to talk baseball and put me in front of a camera.
With the future stars, do you feel like it helps with your scouting background being able to put together events?
Without question. I believe that more college coaches and pro scouts, and that is not an aside to anybody else when I say this, have to work together on impacting the amateur player, right? If you're a college coach, you have at some point had to grind. Without question, you've had to do some of the most thankless jobs on the planet to become some successful, and it changes your character with that, right? If you're a pro scout, it's pretty similar. A lot of these guys give their lives to the game, and they never make more than $65,000, $70,000 a year. And for what they put into it, that's in my view a little criminal, right? But that's the job. That's it.
That's what it is.
Correct.
I don't wish that for anybody, but that's what you sign up for. I'm sorry. We've had a lot of conversations about that I don't wish what I had to do on anybody, but that's what the job entailed, so you had to do it. And I'm glad I did it. I would go back and do it all over. Not everybody feels that way, but I would go back and do it all over again, all the jobs, because it leads to that next thing.
I'm with you. I wouldn't trade a second, and I wouldn't wish necessarily some of the stuff you have to go through on it, but I also wouldn't changed a second of my path, no matter what I've had to go through, good, bad, or otherwise. Because without any of those experiences, I don't get to sit here today. I'm not the same person. I don't have the same personal development and growth. And the very nature of us waking up every day is failing. Right, that's what we do. We're human beings. We're going to fail. I have faith. Ryan, I know you do too. I mean, for me, the fact that you're a human means you're fallible and you're imperfect and you're going to make the mistakes. That's why you're a human being. And so how you respond from those things tells me more than the mistake you made. Unless the mistake is something that hurt somebody else, that's different. But when it comes to how you go forward with it, so back to that. When it comes to these events, I remember being the kid on the other side who wanted the instruction, who wanted the help, who wanted to grow and wanted the advancement, and was just looking for answers to take it back and apply it. And every time a player walks through our doors, we try to leave them better than when we found them. And I think that can usually come from scouting and coaching, because you understand the failure, you understand the grind. That doesn't mean that amateur coaches don't get it. Doesn't mean that high school coaches and travel coaches don't get it, because they do. But not all of them. Not everybody's in this thing for the right reasons, man. You know what I mean? So when it comes to putting these events together, I'm thankful for all of that, because it taught me what was needed to go back to pro baseball. And I always felt like this, and college coaches, have confirmed this with me over time. College coaches will always, it's different. They'll always follow what the pro guys do. Pro guys in the ballpark, college coaches are interested. It doesn't necessarily work the other way around. College coaches can be interested in a guy that pro guys want nothing to do with, okay? But it does work that way. So if I can do it at the highest levels of the game as far as bringing that together, we can develop a good product, and as such, develop the better connected tissue so that colleges, players, and scouts can make better decisions for themselves.
That's one of the reasons I always went to the San Diego County All-Star Game, because the scouts ran it. The San Diego Pro Scouts ran the San Diego County All-Star Game. So I always went because they knew exactly what everybody wanted to see, so it was run right. There was the training component, so yeah, the 60 and all that, but then they played. And for me, I think you have to have all of that. If you want to get a true evaluation on kids, I think you have to have all of that involved with it. We've been,
the funny thing about that, Ryan, is when you say having all of it involved, we've been I'm 47 years old, so I am by no stretch at the end of the line, right? We'll say that. What I can say is that people in our age demographic, have unfairly been branded as dinosaurs and old heads, and right, people that can't think this. And I'm looking at myself like, man, I'm better at 47 than I was at 22. Like, I don't know what to tell you. The stuff that we do for numbers, that you may have seen the release with Synergy, the things that we do in there, man, you find me somewhere else that does that type of analytics. Like, that's pretty in depth, right? We're finding, strike percentages and swing and misses and fastball counts and taking the TrackMan data or the Rapsodo data, whatever we've got available to us, and working with that to mold development plans backwards and be able to give that information in predictive modeling. I'm going to go ahead and say that's a little progressive. I'm gonna go ahead and say that's all of it. That's not the old head stuff. And so when you put all that together, I think you can get a better product. And the kids need the education, because, man, these schools are going to do it. They're doing it, and these pro clubs are doing it. They want to see this info. And if you're not doing it, or you're not participating in places where you can get this, you're behind. You're behind, because I promise you this, Ryan Brownlee and Jeremy Booth are going to hunt that stuff out. We're going to go play, and we're going to get better, and then we're going to pass you, right? And so having these events that can construct that, and look, there's a lot of people doing really good things. This isn't about exalting one over the other. This is just our way we do it. And we have decided to try to drive that back to these kids and put this together, because if I talk to guys in our advisory board, they know what we're saying. If I talk to guys on the junior college and Division I All-Star selection committees, I know you've talked about that too, or anybody across the game, they understand where that's coming from. That's not just this guy had an 88 mile an hour exit velocity and threw 96 across the diamond. I mean, we do that. I have yet to be asked that question one time. Hey, JB, what was his arm velocity from short? People are like, What? That doesn't matter. Hey, how did he hit with 2 strikes? How was he resilient? Can he use the whole field? Does he stay inside the ball? What do I have to pay to get him? Where do I have to take him? Or who else is interested and can he play short? Entirely different questions, right? And coaches and scouts do that. So I think having
for the infielders, I always stopped watch time from contact to when they got the ball to first base. That's what was on my evaluation sheet of infielders was
that is
contact time
exceptional
when they got to first base.
That's right, because off the bat to the box and how fast you convert it. Here's one, just what you just said. We're testing your clock. What's your clock say, right? Can you move at the speed? Can you make the routine play? So that's all the stuff that people are talking about when they're evaluating. And for us, it just became more focused on doing that, more focused on doing that. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a long way of saying, yes, it helped with the events. That's the absolute foundation of the events is the eval and the development structure beyond it.
How'd you get the idea of having JUCO and high school guys play against each other? Because I thought it was a great I don't think anybody else has done it. I thought it was a great idea. Now, the timing of the year, I think it's hard. I think as you run events, it's hard to find a time in the calendar that works for everything. But the idea itself, I thought, was a great idea.
Okay, so again, this is one of the best. This is exceptional. This is really good. Good questions. And I want to thank you for that one because this is a really interesting one. I will say that I don't think anybody's ever done that. It spawned.
When I saw it, I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Like really interesting."
It spawned a junior college regional series, which we'll do in the fall, right? That'll get into the spring. And play in that Globe Life Showdown. I call it Globe Life because the Rangers hosted it. I believe they're going to have it back. They were exceptional hosts.
They're doing a lot, man. They are doing a lot for the amateur side of baseball right now. Shout out to them because they are doing a ton for the amateur side.
Yeah, and so this is how easy that worked. We have the main event, and that's now at Minute Maid. That was at Fenway. It's now at Minute Maid Park, and we were kind of having a hard time connecting with Minute Maid itself to do this event. Yes, we want it. We'll get back to you. Just didn't happen. Picked up the phone and I called Darren Vaughn, who's on our advisory board, who I know, who's a Midwest guy, but he's a scout in South Texas. Actually drafted Cole Phillips, who's now with Seattle, amongst other guys. And I said to Vaughn, I said, look, kind of having a hard time, getting through this place to connect on this, right? I need to if you guys want to host it, I can bring it to you. And Vonnie says, tell me real quickly what we're doing. And I told him, he said, give me 5 minutes. So he calls Adam Leibowitz and Lefkowitz in their office. And Adam's like, yeah, we want that. Yep, we do. And so that's how that event happened. Dayton Moore got involved with it. I talked to Dayton on the phone. Jim Duquette,
trying to help amateur players. Right? He's the best.
Right?
Like he's one of trying to help and give back.
He's been exceptional. And the Rangers as a whole, Chris Young and Michael Mitten on their event side. I mean, it was real fast. It was real fast to get it done. But the idea actually came from we were in the Caribbean Classic. Okay. And look, this is going to sound those of you we all have known. I'm direct, so we're going to get it out there. There's a lot of competition and chirping that goes on the side of it sometimes. I don't understand why people are chirping this. I don't understand it. And there's other people with some competitor groups who don't get it either. Like we don't understand why we do that. I feel like the only person we're competing with is me. Like I'm looking in the mirror, compete with myself and how good we can be. I don't look at these. I think everybody does some good stuff. I think some stuff can be revised. But that's my opinion. I just think we all do some good things. Long story short with that, we're in the Caribbean Classic. Now I got Trey Phelps. I've got Eric Guevara, who's at Auburn. I've got Mac Hewart, I got Landon Strip. I got a loaded team. I got Zion Rose. I mean, I got Cooper Pratt. I got dudes upon dudes to go down and play in the Caribbean Classic. And they're playing some very talented Dominican kids, like prospects. The guys are going to get paid. And we beat them 49-0. Like it was bad, in 6 games. It was bad. And it was really good. And the reason why we did that was because we had to create an extra international event. And we're the global initiative, right? So when the pandemic hit, the World Combine had shut down, which was all Latin kids. And so we had to create something else for that. So we're down there playing. And I've got this it's just going. Like it's in I'm hearing it. And so I said, look, since we're going to do this, since you guys are going to, so whoever's chirping is going to chirp. My 25, my guys, against anybody else in the world, I'll play you. I said, you can pick the time and place. I'll get the stadium. Now, who I was talking to wasn't necessarily junior colleges, okay? I'm just telling you, I wasn't necessarily talking to JCs. Corey Kohler with San Jack said, we got you. I said,
as
what?
you would. Shout out, Corey.
I said, what? He goes, no. We got you. We'll play you. We'll do it. And so it kind of formed into this idea of, all right, well, now I've kind of thrown down the gauntlet and said I'll play anybody, and anybody showed up. And not just anybody, like San Jack in the junior college world said, right? You know, so now we start putting it together. And Corey was such an instrument and an asset and a friend in putting all this stuff together and bringing people together. He's helped us coordinate this all-star selection committee. And we had a blast, man. We had a blast. We had some really good players. We had Slade Caldwell was there and Eli Crecilius was there. We had some guys, Chris Patterson, some guys that ended up going to school possibly, but guys you see later, David Hoggs and guys that wanted to be there. And there's probably 250 scouts there. You know, guys flew in to see it. And then on the JC side, you got the Colin Linders of the world, who is an alumni, right? You've got quite a few talented guys that was very fun to reconnect with, and a bunch of really good JC coaches. And for the kids, they got to look ahead at just what 1 year of change does physically, as far as what that meant, in some cases two. And they held their own. They had a good experience. Now, they actually beat San Jack. I'm not sure we beat anybody else. We beat San Jack. So I mean, it was for us. It's 1-0, guys. 1-0. So, but I mean, it was great. It was a great experience. We'll do it again. It was fun to be able to create something that impacted so many people. Yeah. That's what I would say. Which is again the whole point of what we do.
I mean, how do we continue to get minority players interested in baseball as opposed to other sports? Because for me, that seems like a great idea to kind of do that, where it shows kids like this is a possibility, this is an opportunity.
We have had pretty good success with those kids, as far as and I say those kids, I mean that demographic that we're referring to. As far as getting them in the door, there's got to be some interest in these in some follow up, right? In doing it. Major League Baseball has done a good job of trying to connect there. They've done a good job of putting in what they can handle, so to speak. I think some other groups out there have a tendency to kind of leverage those players as social justice, see we're doing this, doing that, and there really isn't a whole lot of follow-up there. But I think that minority players, to be interested in the game, have to see a total investment back in their community of the game. And I don't mean that when it comes to RBI, because I have my own opinions on RBI from when I saw it as a kid to where it is today. It's not my fight, and I'm going to that's my line with it. I do think MLB is trying. I do think they are. And I think that Dell Matthews and Tony Regans and the guys in the office are trying to do good things. I think that some other stuff has been out there to compete with it, where maybe there's a better collaboration revision that can happen. We have always tried to work around some of the stuff that's out there that we think is good. I'll mention them because
like it's going to take all of us to get on the same page with that to try to.
And unfortunately, while you have people that don't want to follow through, don't have the commitment to follow through, you know, things can happen. People can fall for the wrong direction. You know, traveling on the wrong path. You got to get back into the community. You got to create opportunities that don't have people getting on planes all the time. And here's something else I'll tell you. If it doesn't have to be free, it shouldn't be. Because you got to have something that people are invested in. You are providing a service. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, but that's not what it means. What it means is that You have to find a way to find a balance so that there is not special treatment being given unless absolutely necessary, because I don't think anybody wants. I can tell you as a minority, I don't want somebody handing me anything because I have brown skin or I'm black. I don't want that. I'm not going to do it. I want to earn my own way. And I think in society, we're so much better today than my parents had to go through. And before that, our society's done a really good job of becoming colorblind as best we can, right? But in the community, you have to be able to find a way to connect to these kids in ways that make it affordable to play, not necessarily free, because someone's always paying the bill. Affordable to play, but also in a way that enhances that development and growth and keeps players like that, who may be a little bit further behind initially in development, right, pathway, in places that enhance that development first. If you do that and you have the connection back to the big leagues, whether it's white, black, Latin, Asian, it doesn't matter to me, to come back and to give back to these players across the industry, you'll see a resurgence. Now, the numbers are improving, and honestly, man, that's really because of a collaboration of, whether it's intentional or not, of people trying. There's a group that has some people in it I'm not necessarily a fan of, but Minority Baseball Prospects does a good job of focusing just on that. Okay. When it comes to Perfect Game, they've done a good job in spurts of focusing on that type of player. Certainly the foundation that is no longer Perfect Game, the rise to greatness there, the Forwards are trying to do some really good stuff with that initiative. And there's no doubt about that. And I know, as a quote, I'm not supposed to say that, but I don't care. That's people are doing good things. Okay. And then MLB.
One of my favorite, Jerry, and still is. Jerry's Forwards is one of my favorite people in the world. I will go to bat for that guy any chance I get. He's been very good to me over the years.
Yeah, I never had to.
For people from it's one of those outside noise things. Like, if you ever got an opportunity to spend any amount of time with Jerry, I would be in that press box at the Colonel Stadium with Jerry, and it'd be he and I just talking baseball. If you got to spend any amount of time with just you and him, that outside noise would go away for anybody. That's just
I have no issue with the Ford family. I never have. I have no issue with how he earned it, what he built. I think he deserves a medal for what he did. He took something from scratch in the Midwest when players were ignored, right, and tried to get them seen. And I've heard the stories, I've heard the ups and the downs and the backs and the forths, and that's part of business in life when you're trying to build something. But Jerry Ford was also a part-time guy with the Twins. Right. And so the Twins story, when I was there was a little bit of connection. Matter of fact, Mike Ruth said to me one time, Mike Ruth, came one time, Ruthie said, we got two guys that started this type of stuff. We got Jerry Ford and Jeremy Booth. I thought it was great. It was pretty funny. But, what the Fords built, and even Ben had a good arm. Ben went out and played, what the Fords built, while I never had much time to interact with them when I wasn't unless I was scouting, it's impressive. And it helped a lot of players. And if anything, what it really did beyond helping kids was it helped college baseball, because that's what really helped to boom to college baseball was Perfect Game, right? And so you can't, the way they had it, the way they did it. And I would never begrudge that. I do think you're right about the outside noise, and that's why I say competitors, because we're not competitors. They did something really good. We do something different. We're not competitors. So,
and we're going to do a travel forum with our travel committee, and I'm doing that so people can see, like, when everybody gets in the same room together and has conversations, like, everybody's in it for the right reasons. Like, again, there's outside noise on this, but when you get Perfect Game together, when you get Prep Baseball Report together, when you get those guys together, they're in it. Like, again, it's outside noise. Like, I'm trying to shine a light on all of that. Like, everybody thinks they're fighting. They're not. Like, they're not. They're trying to help. Yes, they're trying to make money. Like, I understand that part of it. But when you get everybody in the same room together, and I think that's what the convention shows too, is when you get everybody together for 3 or 4 days, you see how tight the baseball community is.
I walked up to Taylor McCullough.
He's my man. Shout out Taylor. Yeah. Love him.
I walked up to Taylor McCullough at ABCA in Dallas, and I was talking to Mitch Thompson first, and I said, kind of, who's that? Because I'm in my bubble, man. I focus on me, and I'm not really, And he said, that's Taylor McCullough, a Perfect Game. I said, I gotta go say hi. I got to introduce myself. Heard so many good things about the guy. I'm gonna go say hello. And I walked over, shook my hand. He goes, "Yeah, Jeremy." He had some good words, and I had some good words back. We talked for a minute. And people were staring at us when they were walking by. Like, are these two supposed to be throwing blows, or are they supposed to be getting along?
Oh.
And we just said the same thing. We said there's just no reason for that. Look, there's competition out there because we're all trying to do good stuff. There's only so many dates on the calendar, and there's some streamlining I think that's been done. If you look at the calendar this year, I'll just leave it there. There's some streamlining. Everybody's got kind of their time, right? PGA is obviously loaded up in June. We're into July. It's really when we are, right? As well as the selection times kind of work off each other, and that includes Area Code and East Coast Pro. And then there's some stuff that goes down the line, beyond that. So there's some competition that's natural. It's natural competition. But if you're doing your thing, everybody's got something they do well, and we're all trying to do something good for people. And so if we can do that, should be able to get through. But back to the minority question. We've done it. I think we've done a good job with it. It has been something that has happened naturally. It hasn't been something where it's been forced. I don't believe in the back and forth of favoritism because of skin color or discrimination. I just don't do it. So it's just kind of inherently happened. When it comes to what's happened across the industry, it started to get better, but you still have to get back into the communities and develop and teach first, and then you can go present it another way.
Well, did you decide to write a book on your own, or somebody say, "Hey, I think you should write a book"?
The second one. I had no interest in writing a book. It was the pandemic, and everybody's home. And I mentioned that World Combine that got shut down 4 days before we were supposed to go to IMG. The thing got stopped. The whole world stopped. And so while we're all trying to figure out what to do, I'm sitting in the house, right? And so people are trying to go online. They're trying to figure something to stay busy and get better, use that time. And so I wrote something called Scout School, put that on. We had that online, and that was there for more of a training tool, right? It had some traction pretty good and grew into something that helped. Anyway, took about 2 years to complete that because we went back. I'm in Texas, right? So Texas decided in May the pandemic didn't exist. We just decided it wasn't around. So everybody came back to work in Texas, and COVID, we all forgot it. So I went back to work here. And it took till 21 to get that done as far as different levels. There's a scouting and player development level. There's a just amateur scouting foundations. There's a pro scouting, all that kind of in one spot. And then I got approached, "Hey, why don't you make this into a book?" And so in 22, when the world kind of really reopened, they didn't have a ton of time, to do it. So I started putting it together. I had it edited, and it came together quickly, 6-8 months, with some people that looked at it, because I was used to talking in scout speak, right? So I'm talking in scout speak, and then I got to put some palatable words around it. And so I put that together, and then I got to have it edited, checked back. And so it was a process. But all in all, it's probably a 3-year project, and then finally it came out, and it was really well received. It was meant to help players and families figure out where they fit in this world of trying to go forward, right? We are very, very honest, Ryan. Some people have said you can't run a business telling that much truth. And I say, I don't know how else to do it.
I'm going to say the truth hurts sometimes. Like, the truth hurts.
Yeah. It does. And so, we do that in the events. And the book was about helping families self-evaluate, understand what the pro lens is supposed to be, and how they can apply that to college, right? How they can apply that where they're going. It was received well. It was a success. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to write it. It's still hard to believe I did it. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot of people have done it. I was clearly not the first, and I won't be the last. But it's a labor, man. It's a labor of love and knowledge, and the book sales, they're really not. You don't really, if you write a book for how much you're going to sell.
Good luck.
Yeah, right. I got Amazon deposited some money in my account the other day. That was great. But if you write a book for how much you're going to sell, it sells for a month, man. That's what it is. It sells right away, and then after that, it's about the perseverance and the time and the commitment and the message, and then it really becomes like how it finds you. Heck, man, the science of hitting found me in a car wash when I was 19 years old. The science of hitting. I'm in a car wash in Sepulveda in LA, and I'm getting my card done, and I'm looking at the the carousels. Right, the carousels used to have the books in them, and I look at it, and there's a sign sitting by Ted Williams. I'm going, that was like something. How is that here? Let me go ahead and get that. It was $4. It was $4. But books have a way of finding you, and so the hope is that book finds who's going to need it. Yep. That's the hope, and I'm very proud to have done it.
You talk about balance. I mean, how do you find balance? Obviously, your schedule's maybe not as hectic as scouting, but your schedule's hectic. So how do you find balance?
My schedule is more hectic now than it comes to scouting. It's just different. The travel schedule isn't as hectic. When I was scouting, I said 250 days. You know how it goes. One day I'm in Lexington. The next day I'm in Baton Rouge. The next after that I'm in LA.
Yeah, you're spending more time in the road than you are at the ballpark.
Correct. And this way it's different. I do get some time in Houston. I do get some time in my own bed. I spend time with my dogs. I spend time with the people around me. I'm very protective of who's around me when it comes to my circle of privacy, because I think you have to be. I think in our game we become a lot more family with each other over time because we spend so much time together, and our personal lives are kind of like cut off limits in some ways. You know what I mean? And I think that's how it should be. But look, the way that I find balance, Ryan, and this is just me. And so what I do is I study, and I go through this thing, and I do it all the time, and I find the ways to read it. And you can see my dog actually got a piece of this thing right here, right? When I wasn't looking at it, Bernie did. And I read stuff, like some of the works. I read stuff like The Art of War, and I read stuff like books on Kennedy. And I try to find a way to get my mind to think different every day. But I don't do anything without looking in the Bible first. It's just something for me that centers me, and I don't. I've read the Bible 5-6 times cover to cover. Truthfully, the lessons that are in there are always different, even though they're the same. And it's for me, the faith has got me through some ridiculously hard times. It's got me through some attacks on my person. It's got me through some mistakes that I've made. It's got me through believing tomorrow is going to be there. It's gotten me through understanding that it's still bigger than me, and what I'm going through, someone's got it worse, and how do I impact who's got it worse besides me in whatever way that I can.
I've read every one of the major religions books, and it's amazing to me why there's so much fighting among the different religions, because the central book is very similar for all of those religions, but that's part of stepping outside your comfort zone a little bit too. I was lucky in college. I was able to take some religion classes, so it's kind of forced to read those texts, but it was amazing to me. Like, there's a lot of similarities among all of them, and like that's the crazy thing for me with the infighting with some of the stuff that's going on. It's like it shouldn't be that way. But when do you find time? Do you have a set time during the day that you read the Bible?
Yeah, I wake up in the morning. I get on the side, let my dogs out in the backyard when I'm home. I get on the side of the side of my bed, and I do my push-ups, and I do some stretching real quick just to wake my body up. And then I open it. And if I'm traveling, I use my phone. We've all got these Bible apps now, and so you can look at that and go from there. And there's always a secondary book. The one I'm reading right now for the second time is Crime and Punishment. That's not easy. Dostoevsky's not easy.
Good book.
Second time through that, then I'll dive back into the Iliad. Yeah. That's my next on the shelf. So I kind of go down the list. I probably get to these books once every couple of years. But I think these texts are so important to reset and expand your knowledge, because you find different things every single time you do it. So I do that kind of first.
Older, like I've said this a lot. Like, as you get older, books that you read at 20 are going to speak to you different at 47. Like, it's good to revisit those books that meant a lot to you. And I go back and reread. I like the philosophers too. I like Nietzsche. I like some of the nihilist stuff out there. I like a lot of the existential. I read a lot of existential philosophers growing up, high school, college, just because I was searching for things But I do like to go back and revisit some of those things. More for me, more it's the Buddhist stuff. The Yamas and Niyamas is my favorite book. It's very small, but I do the same thing with that book because it talks about non-harm. There's a lot of good tenets in there that are just good reminders of how you need to live, and it just kind of checks yourself every once in a while too.
Yeah, it definitely changes every year with what you go through. It shows you a different side of it, right? But the way I find balance is by looking internal with the lessons I'm learning that are in front of me. And I don't believe in forcing things. I don't believe in pushing things. Everything has a time. There is a time and a place. And for me, the time and the place is early in the morning. My mind's fresh. And it helps me get through no matter what I've got to get through. There are times, Ryan, with some battles that we all fight that we don't sleep a whole lot. And there are times that, you're traveling around and you're running. There's times that you neglect certain areas because that's just a requirement that has to be done to get back to that part of life. I try to keep those in stride and be as supportive as I can to those around me. I don't take people's dependence in some ways on me and what we do here and buy-in and faith lightly. But if I'm not the best version of me, then I can't be a good version for them either. And I have to take that time to find that peace. That in the gym, to be honest, I'm in there every day. It's part of it to make myself feel better. And as I've gotten older, I'm starting to appreciate my nutrition, which changes your mindset, of course. It's funny how our parents knew nothing when we were 20, but man, at 45, they sure got it all figured out, right? So
I know if I slide, get on my bed and wake up time, make that the same, work out in the morning, meditate, and then eat, right? Funny how healthy foods and whole foods change everything about the way you feel and think too.
It's been the journey, and reflecting on that journey is how I found balance. I've had a lot of really good mentors and teachers, and I'm very thankful for all they've poured into me to help me wake up today and try to be a better version of myself than I was yesterday. So that's how I find balance, man. I don't. I'm not somebody for the bars. I'm not somebody for the clubs. We've talked about, it never really was. And we talk about, when I've been at ABCA, you very rarely will see me off the floor. You might see me having lunch somewhere, or say hi when you're passing by me. And I know guys get together and do that. And guys got their own way of, for me, it's just not what I do it. I take a step back. I internalize. Doesn't mean I don't want to talk to people and say hello and get to know people, because I'm thankful for the baseball community in more ways than I can ever properly articulate. It just means that for me, the balance is so important, to have that quiet time and that solitude and introspection, to be one with what's around you. And for me, my creator.
What are some final thoughts before I let you go?
This sport uniquely creates men who can pretty much handle anything if they put their mind to it. It is a game of failure. It is a game of wild success. It is one that we talked about earlier where everybody, and I do mean everybody, has an opinion. You don't find that in basketball or football or hockey, but in this one, everybody's got an opinion. Try to learn. I think we all need to try to learn every day from what's around you, because we don't have it figured out. None of us do. I don't.
And it's okay to change your mind. I've tried to stress that. It's okay to change your mind. And you should, as you get older, you should change your mind on your view. Your worldview should change as you get older. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to admit those things. I think as men, we go through that from a vulnerability standpoint, and it's the ego thing more than anything else. But you should change your mind as you get older.
Tim O'Neill said to me, the minute you transmit your report, you're wrong. That's the first thing he said. Okay, because they never do what you think you're going to do. And that stuck with me for a long time, and obviously still today. And what I mean by that is that you're always going to, what I take from that is you're always going to second guess your judgment. It's going to happen. But I believe that if we do things with this game as a vehicle, because the game doesn't need us, if we do things in ways that benefit others and do what we think is right because of others, what we get out of it is so much more rewarding. Now, that doesn't mean you let somebody walk into your house and take what's yours. That's not what I said. What I said is do it for others. Use the game as a vehicle for the players that will come behind you. Remember who you were at one time as a player and a coach. Pay it forward. Be selfless the best you can. And anybody who is trying to tear you down, I don't care who that is, that's not your people.
That's outside noise. Again, that's outside noise.
And you let them go, and you carry yourself with dignity in class. As Patrick Swayze said in Roadhouse, be nice till it's time to not be nice. But you carry yourself with dignity in class, as my dad used to say, and the world will take care of itself.
Thanks for your time, Jeremy. I'm glad we got to be able to connect finally. It's awesome.
Ryan, I appreciate it. Thank you.